Tensions are rising very rapidly in the Red Sea between Yemen and the United States after the latter's attack yesterday on Yemen that killed over 30 people and wounded over 100 people, innocent civilians in these attacks. But before we clarify what's happening now and the response that came from Yemen and the response that came from Iran as well, we need to understand why this is happening. The Israelis, they decided to block all aid going into the Gaza Strip after phase 1 of the deal of the ceasefire ended. According to that same agreement, Israel should continue allowing all aid into the Gaza Strip. Of course, they already had so many shortages and did not allow much of the aid that they agreed to get into Gaza to go into Gaza, especially in relation to the temporary housing, heavy equipment, and also medical equipment to help support the healthcare system in Gaza that's going through a crisis. Now, Israel decided, of course, to have this blockade. They did not allow anything in, and they also stopped any normal aid, any like food, any water. They cut off the electricity of the population of Gaza, again going against everything in the ceasefire agreement that they agreed to. They agreed to with the mediators, with the United States, with Qatar, and with Egypt, and with the Palestinian side as well. After that, Yemen, they warned Israel, Ansarullah or Houthis, they warned Israel. They said, if you continue down this path of not allowing aid into the Gaza Strip, we'll resume our operations. And they initially said, we will resume our operations in the Red Sea, meaning that they will be imposing a blockade against Israel in the Red Sea and in the areas surrounding it too. The Gulf of Aden and the Arabian Sea as well. So Ansarullah are taking a responsive measure against a genocidal entity like they have before, after no other state really did what Yemen did at the time, which is imposing a fully legitimate blockade on a country committing genocide, a country that is confirmed to be committing genocide by the ICJ, with wanted criminals leading the country, wanted for the ICC, war criminals. So instead of course, the United States, the main supporter of Israel, telling them, hold on a second, take a step back, things are escalating, and we don't really want to get into fight here in the Red Sea again after, well, they stopped after a year, Yemen, after the ceasefire began and aid started to get into Gaza. But of course their conditions before were, we will stop once the genocide stops and the siege is lifted. Now, of course, one of the main things has been breached severely, the siege. Israel still has breaches and they still kill civilians, not to the same extent that they had before. That doesn't, of course, make it in any way better, of course, but they are not having the same attacks that they conducted inside of Gaza before the ceasefire took place. The United States, no word against Israel, no criticism of the Israeli actions, despite them breaching international law constantly. Yemen made the decision, they started to have these attacks, this embargo, to be more specific, on Israel and any Israeli-linked ship. Unlike what some would like to say, that they are preventing and banning all ships from going through the Red Sea, that is absolutely false. And the Yemenis many times repeated that they're only targeting Israel and Israeli-linked ships. The United States, under the Trump administration, they wanted to flex muscles quickly, and Donald Trump himself came up with a statement saying that we're going to rain down hell. He likes using the sentence, they will pay with hell. And they had this attack. Again, civilians were killed inside of Yemen, which is a very big escalation, a very serious escalation, especially after the fact that they stopped. And well, it only took the United States, it could have taken the United States just to tell Israel, stop, allow the aid in, and go actually into phase 2 like you agreed. No, from their perspective, Israel can breach, they can do whatever they want, and will still defend them and attack Yemen on their behalf. That happened. And yesterday we spoke about the prospect of Yemen directly attacking the USS Harry S. Truman, the aircraft carrier. I thought that they would choose that as the first target, and they did today. They confirmed that they had 18 missiles, cruise missiles, and drones targeting the USS Harry S. Truman and the ships or destroyers accompanying it. There was also a statement coming from Abdul Malik al-Houthi, who is the leader of Ansarullah, a very long speech he had today, during which he severely criticized the Arab position for not taking action against Israel. He also said that the Yemeni position is independent of Iran because there have been many statements trying to link Iran with what Yemen is doing. And Yemen has proven many times that they are indeed independent. Of course, Iran supports them, but, well, they have their independent view. They are heavily backed by the Yemeni people. Millions are out in the streets every single week in Yemen to support Gaza and also to ask their government to take action, and they are. And he also continued to say that there will be more escalation coming. Of course, from the escalation coming, we are now expected to see another phase of direct attacks against Israel, by the way. Because Yemen, they know very well that the United States, or the genocide coalition led by the United States, which includes Britain as well, is primarily there to save Israel, to protect Israel by the demand of Israel as well. The United States and Britain using taxpayers' money to save a country committing war crimes and a genocide and a blockade against over 2 million people and wreaking havoc in the whole region against multiple countries all at once. They are planning, and they have these attacks ready. And from an Israeli perspective, Israel is ready as well. So there was a report in Israel today saying that Israel, on Channel 14, they said, source said that the defense establishment is preparing for the possibility of a Houthi attack on Israel by air and by sea. So we could be seeing, for the first time since October the 7th, an ongoing confrontation between Yemen and Israel without any other front being directly active against Israel. So in Gaza, there's still a ceasefire. Hamas are not attacking Israel. In Lebanon, there's a ceasefire. Israel is still breaching. Hezbollah are not attacking Israel. And it would only be Yemen. This is the first time this is going to happen. And that fact could change the way both Israel and the genocide coalition led by the United States operate against Yemen. They might be viewing Yemen now to be in a weak position, therefore potentially applying more pressure and using more aggressive measures against Yemen, despite the defiance, by the way. And the defiance that came from Yemen is exactly as it was before. Nothing is going to stop us. We will not stop the attacks up until Israel lifts the siege of Gaza. But now we actually have a genuine prospect to see a very large operation against Yemen that could potentially lead to an all-out war. Of course, primarily by Air Force. The United States, well, they failed in having a proper coalition. They ended up only being with Britain, really, to fight Yemen. Other European countries who are NATO members too said that they will be participating, only sent an observer, hardly anything. So it's very unlikely for the United States to have any sort of ground operation, apart from maybe a special operation here and there. But even that is very limited. But they will most likely increase the attacks against Yemen and have more aggressive attacks against Yemen, leading to more casualties with the Yemeni population. And yesterday, the initial report in Yemen said that over 40 strikes took place yesterday. But today, Yemen confirmed that it was actually over 170, which means this is a very aggressive and very quick response from the United States to the blockade that Yemen said that they will restart, and they actually indeed restarted. Now, how can that affect the situation on the ground? Of course, there's a ceasefire negotiation path going. Things are very tense with the ceasefire. Israel is breaching, Israel is killing people. Israel is also killing people in Lebanon. Today, they also killed more people in Lebanon. 2 people reported to be killed. 1 more reported to be killed in Gaza as well. But Benjamin Netanyahu declared that they are indeed sending a delegation. They're sending a delegation to Doha to continue the negotiations. The United States administration are criticizing Hamas. Witkoff is criticizing Hamas, saying that, oh no, actually they did not really, that's not a good response. Them saying that, we will release one American Israeli and then 4 bodies. That's not satisfactory. Fact of the matter is, though, they are still talking, so there is a prospect of reaching some sort of a solution. This is all linked to Benjamin Netanyahu and Benjamin Netanyahu's plans to continue in power, to keep his coalition, to avoid all of the problems that he's having inside of Israel. And now things are escalating even further inside of Israel. Today, Benjamin Netanyahu declared that he will begin taking actions to sack the serving Shabak head Ronen Bar. Several days back, we spoke about the criticism that came from the ex-head of the Shabak, or the Shin Bet, Nadav Argaman, who said that if Netanyahu does not release all of the information or acts against the law, I will publish everything. Netanyahu lost his mind after that. He actually now, today, submitted a demand from the Israeli police to carry out an investigation against Argaman, saying that he is acting like a mafia boss, that is threatening the democratic regime inside of Israel, and that it's wholly unacceptable for him to do that. And there are problems both ways. That's for you to understand that there are tensions. There have been tensions from the beginning, by the way, not only between Benjamin Netanyahu and the Shabak, but between Benjamin Netanyahu and the IDF and Benjamin Netanyahu and other security bodies inside of Israel that we spoke about many times. The problem that he's having with Ronen Bar, this current serving head, is that he refused to resign. He said that I still have work to do and I will carry on doing it. So we're facing a case of Benjamin Netanyahu saying, I want to sack you. And he's saying, no, I'm not going to leave my job. I still have work to do. He's saying that I actually spoke with Benjamin Netanyahu, and his actual demand from me now is absolutely against the Israeli law. He's saying it's rejected, it's refused, he's refusing it, and it's contrary to the law. So he is establishing his position to refuse this resignation on Israeli law. So we might see, for the first time ever in Israeli history, a legal battle between a serving prime minister and a serving head of one of the biggest security bodies inside of Israel, which is the Shin Bet. And also, Ronen Bar made other statements. He said, as the head of the Shin Bet on October the 7th, I took the responsibility for the services part and clearly stated that I intend to fulfill it before the end of the term, as was expected by everyone. Therefore, it is clear that the intention in dismissing me is not in the context of October the 7th. The Prime Minister made it clear that the decision stems from his claim that there is a continued lack of trust between us. And he is referencing that to previous meetings he had. Multiple reports in Israel said that in the past couple of weeks, they met. Benjamin Netanyahu has been trying to apply pressure on him. There were reports that he wanted to sack him, the head of the Mossad and the head of the IDF chief of staff, who now resigned. And he decided to take it step by step so he doesn't attract a lot of criticism. But now he's actually going ahead and doing it. He's getting the support from Smotrich and Ben Gvir. He is getting a lot of criticism from others inside of Israel who are actually, well, the head of the opposition said that they will be challenging this legally against Benjamin Netanyahu. And that it's wholly unacceptable. Benjamin Netanyahu is in a hysteria mode and he's completely panicking. That's also linked, by the way, to the investigation that was carried out by the Israeli Shin Bet into the corruption in the Benjamin Netanyahu office, blaming certain figures in the Netanyahu office that they are getting money from Qatar. They are getting money from Qatar. This is extremely dangerous, by the way, and Benjamin Netanyahu took this report very, very seriously. So from an Israeli perspective, Benjamin Netanyahu, he wants to remain in this position so long as he is battling all of this. Because in many of his speeches and his statements, he always uses the fact that he is the current serving prime minister and they have an ongoing war. If Benjamin Netanyahu, all of a sudden, we have a ceasefire phase 2, all of the criticisms against him, people are going to ask for early elections. He will no longer be the prime minister very soon after, because people are going to be asking for early elections. They're going to be asking him to take responsibility, and they will be asking for a proper independent state investigation that Benjamin Netanyahu is still refusing to this day. Benjamin Netanyahu is only saying that, no, if any investigation needs to take place, it needs to be approved by the Israeli government, of course, by him, like he wants to do with the Israeli Supreme Court. From what the United States is doing, by going on and attacking this barbaric attack against the Yemeni civilians, although the Ansarullah are not taking actions against civilians, they're taking action against a genocidal entity, imposing a wholly legitimate embargo on a country committing war crimes, something that the United States and its allies should be doing, and actually have done, but for other reasons, not for genuine reasons, because of their concerns of human rights breaches. So the situation is getting very complicated. Now, from the perspective of each front, we need to understand a couple of things. From the Gaza perspective, from the Hamas perspective, the Palestinian perspective, they are interested in keeping the ceasefire. Israel, it doesn't look like it wants to break all of the tools, because if they wanted to, well, they wouldn't have gotten into a ceasefire agreement and lose all of that, what they called progress inside of Gaza, with their presence in so many parts of Gaza, with their occupation, for example, of the Netzarim corridor, something they were very proud of. And now they only have 2 divisions outside of Gaza. And they're still talking. So we need to understand that Benjamin Netanyahu is delaying for everything to suit his timeline and his own interests. So we're talking about a total psychopathic leader going against, well, not only the population inside of Israel's will, and he's also going against the establishment itself, people who are actively participating in what Israel is conducting in this whole genocide campaign. He is against the IDF, he's against the Shin Bet. He also put the head of the Mossad on the side when it comes to the negotiations, and he's only putting the close aide of his, Ron Dermer, as the head of this negotiating delegation now again. Contrary to what he's done a couple of weeks ago, by the way. It wasn't Ron Dermer taking the lead on the whole negotiating team. They went there as officials from 2 to 3 main bodies inside of Israel. Hezbollah as well in Lebanon. They are not, in the very short term, interested in escalating despite Israeli breaches. That leaves us with Yemen. That leaves us with Yemen, and that leaves us with Iran. And there are many attempts to link the two, to try and portray it as if it's Iran actually asking Yemen to carry out these attacks against it. And that's something that many spoke about today, including those in Ansarullah, in the Houthi movement, and also Yemeni observers and analysts as well. That no, Yemen clearly is taking a fully independent position, independent of any external force, and they have the public mandate too, and they operate based on the public mandate too. And that Yemen, well, even before the Houthis were there, they were still supporting Palestine before Ansarullah even existed. But now, according to them, thankfully, they have the power. They have this revolutionary leadership that is carrying out these actions regardless of anyone, regardless of what anyone thinks, regardless of all of the other positions of the countries who are not necessarily stepping up and taking any action to apply leverage on Israel or the United States, or even show like a proper position. That leads us to Iran. Iran made a couple of statements, primarily by the head of the IRGC, Hossein Salami. Hossein Salami said today that, well, they're warning. He's warning. He's saying, should the enemies dare to carry out any threat against Iran, they will face the country's severe and devastating reaction. He also said, I warn the enemies that any threat being carried out against Iran will draw a tough, decisive, and devastating reaction. He also stated that Iran would overtly accept responsibility for any measure it takes anywhere and anytime. This could be very linked to the attack of Ansarullah and the talks trying to link Iran with Ansarullah, saying that, well, if we actually did carry out, we will totally accept it. We have nothing to worry about. He's saying that Iran as a state, if they will attack or support anybody, they will unequivocally announce it. And he stressed out that Iran always accepted responsibility for its actions, such as the True Promise operation against the Israeli regime. And from the tone that we're hearing from Iran, by the way, they're somewhat distancing themselves from the attack that was carried out by Yemen, and also the statements that are coming out from Yemen are saying that we are indeed independent. So clearly, well, if the United States or Israel, they are trying to use these attacks against Yemen, for example, to lead to an attack against Iran, Iran is cutting it from now. Because Iran, although they have a pending response that they promise that they will deliver, True Promise 3 against Israel, they're not necessarily interested in that response right now. And yesterday we spoke about when actually Iran attacked when things got really very, very much heated, and after they were attacked, their sovereignty was attacked, whether when it comes to a consulate, embassy, or an attack directly against Iran, whether or not it was endorsed by the perpetrators, Israel, especially the one in Tehran. So complicated. The situation is complicated, and it's actually getting more tense now. And from the way things are going, we could actually see a few weeks coming ahead that we haven't seen since October the 7th, primarily because Yemen at the moment are acting on their own. Militarily, Ansarullah are acting on their own. The United States and Israel, they're viewing that as an opportunity. They could potentially escalate, but that could also lead to Ansarullah as a movement taking more actions that we haven't seen before, in their severity, in their intensity. And all of that, there's a very likelihood that it would lead to a further escalation that will, well, if it expands too much, will undoubtedly include Iran at some point. So far, well, if the negotiations go ahead and things succeed, all of that will be resolved. But again, you have Israel and you have its backers who are, well, not interested in following agreements or putting Israel in its place, a war criminal entity, but only allowing Israel to get away with murder time after time and equipping them with the tools of that murder against the Palestinian people.